So we're obviously moving out a little bit out of the id standard direction for titles here. And gameplay-wise, it is going to be about 50% run and gun, as people would sort of expect from us. But we've also got a significant aspect of driving action in there. And personally, I like the driving games a lot. Nice, simple, straightforward gameplay and everything on there. And then there's also an adventure component to this where you get money, you build up your car, add new things to it, all that. So it's a very different type of game. But it's, we made the decision consciously after Doom 3 that we weren't going to just follow up one of our existing IPs. We've got Wolf, Doom, and Quake, and they're all great, and we're going to continue to work with those through both internally and through partner teams on here. But we're making two new bets with new IPs. From the low end, we've got Orcs and Elves coming up from the mobile to the DS, which I'm also very excited about. I've got a lot of stuff to say about that. But then our big bet here is brand new IP, brand new technology base, cross-platform across all of these. And we're pretty darn excited about everything that we can do on here. The technical thing that everybody is sort of latched onto that we talk about the most is the mega texture aspect here, where this entire world is uniquely textured on here, in that there's, we can zoom in on all this stuff where you can jump down and you can have the giant cliff faces, you can have, showing all the different erosion and striation things on there. We'll show you the tools that we use to actually go ahead and build all these things, because it's really pretty neat in a lot of ways. And you can go ahead and get all the way down and add specific little detail. You can scroll graffiti in different places. And there's multiple aspects to it. There's one of just like grabbing any given scene and saying we can make this look as good as we want. It doesn't have to look like a computer game. It can look like a matte painting on here. But beyond just the aspect of saying make any given screenshot look cool, which you could always do by just blowing your entire texture budget on one scene. You can always engineer a screenshot. But we're no longer limited to saying, well, you spend all of your budget here. The technology allows us to go ahead and spread that out, and as much time and labor as we want to put into it, we can make all of the areas look like that. But there's a lot of really significant development aspects to it. And this is one of those things that, on the one hand, as a graphics programmer, I do like to talk about specifically what we can do with graphics, but in many ways the more important things are how it impacts the development. Because the development process is, you may have great technology, but when you can't get the game done, or you wind up going over budget and having to ship before you're ready, and all of these things, they can have a larger impact on the actual quality and enjoyment of a game than any given piece of technology in there. So in addition to allowing us to create huge amounts of detail on things, which can make some areas look great and cool and everything, it also has this really significant benefit of any work that's done on the surfaces here is guaranteed to have zero impact on the performance, the stability, the resource utilization, the footprint, any of these things. Now, it's not magic across everything. When you do geometry changes, you still have to worry about budgets and having too much complexity in areas, although we're a very efficient polygon pusher. I mean, there's a lot of polygons going on in all of this. But as far as surfaces, like the artists go in there, that's a 2K by 2K texture on the guy's face. And for the most part, they would do that even back in Doom 3, and then we'd have to say, don't be stupid, we can't afford this, and cut it down to a 512 by 512 on there. But with the new generation of technology here, the artists just don't even ask. They build things as big as they want, and it has zero impact on how the game runs. And that's a really big deal, where especially with the mega texturing stuff on here, you can build out the area, you can start play testing it, and then you can hand it over to one of the surfacing artists, and they can just work on it for as long as you give them, making it look better and better. They can just like grab this little corner here and start working on things and doing that, and it's not going to impact things. And we've never been in that situation before in gaming, because it's always this battle between you kind of rough it out and make it play interesting, then you start making it look good, then it gets slow, and then the AI start having problems on bumping into the things that you've stuck in there, and it's always been this back and forth trade-off. And a lot of times in games, especially when you involve multiple platforms, you go and say, we're going to make it look great on here, build all the stuff on the PC, and then you're like, oh my god, now we have to fit it onto the console. We're throwing away half of all these textures that we created on there just because they won't fit, and then you have to redesign levels to fit on there. So both of these aspects, the fact that we're inherently cross-platform, we have one build system, one source code tree, it just spits out versions for 4 platforms on here. Now, again, it's not magic in that it makes anything that works on one work on the others, but what that does let you do is The problem child is usually the PS3, where you find out you have less, you've got less memory on there, because compared to the 360, you've got 512 megs minus 32 for OS. On the PS3, you've got a 256 split minus 96 for OS, so you always run out of memory first on the PS3. But at least when you've got this ability of running it simultaneously there, in the morning you can say, well, stopped working on the PS3, time to go crunch some memory out. And if you do that continuously, rather than building your whole project there and then saying, okay, well, let's bring it over to the PS3. Oh my God, we're 100 megs behind, which is essentially sort of what happened with enemy territory. And we're suffering a lot with enemy territory with the standard industry practice, the way this stuff is usually done. You sort of build on your primary platform and you use other companies to work in parallel with you. Enemy territory has 4 companies deeply involved with this. Splash Damage doing the core game. A good chunk of the team at id is involved with just helping enemy territory come together. And then we have Nerve and Z-Axis doing the 2 console ports. And yeah, theoretically, we're passing builds and code and everything back and forth, but there's no doubt that there's millions of dollars of inefficiency in doing this, especially trying to hit a simultaneous release, because we're stuck in all of this where the PC version could be really close to shipping, the 360 version a little bit behind, and then the PS3 version lagging months behind, and perhaps even needing significant stuff. And there's high-level business issues that it's just a big problem. So the integrated cross-platform solution's a really big deal. The new surfacing technology is going to be the visual differentiator for this generation of things. And then some of the decisions that we've made based on our game, like we've decided, and this is sort of a first for id, that the game is expected to ship as a 60 hertz game, because when we do our test plays on here, you run it at 60 and then knock it down to 30. And for a driving game especially, it makes a really big difference. You really do want this extra smoothness of motion in there. But that does put a pretty big constraint on exactly what you choose to do graphics-wise. Megatexture stuff complements that nicely because it's not the most dynamic technology, but it allows you to have still spectacularly good-looking things that are very efficient to render for high frame rates on there. And we think this also has a nice benefit from a technology licensing standpoint, because people can either pick up what we did and and change it around at the same time, or they could choose to go ahead, throw more horsepower at it, be a 30 hertz game, like the majority of games actually do tend to be 30 hertz games. It drops a little bit right there. We're not done with this. We still miss a little. There's like 2 spots in here where we'll drop, and I didn't find out till after E3 exactly where we nailed down what the performance is. It turns out all the little foliage, you wouldn't think it being that tiny little fraction, but that turns out to be the major performance problem on here. But licensees could also choose to go ahead and take this and say, we're going to be a 30 hertz game, and we're going to blow this out of the water by throwing, essentially you can throw almost 3 times as much power at it, because to aim for 60, you have to undershoot by a pretty significant amount, and you've got fixed overheads on different things. So if you make a decision to go for 30, you can do a whole lot more. So there's a whole lot of legs in this, this technology base on here, and there's some fundamentally exciting things about the way this stuff gets built up. The way we do it at our office on here, we have a central server that has all the master files on here for the surfaces, and a full-size wasteland. This is a racetrack, which is a 64K by 64K texture. We have the wastelands, which are 128K by 128K, which is like 80 gigs of uncompressed data. But the neat thing is you can have multiple artists going in, working in different areas on there. And if you're testing something in your little level running around, you can like walk around the corner, come back, and stuff has changed right around you, which is just pretty neat. That was this last week before QuakeCon. I was working on a technical aspect of the drawing of the surfaces on here, and I had a little test map that had that was going into the video there. It was part of the townscape out there, and I'd be going in and testing, and it started off, it was all one kind of tiled texture, and the next day I go in, this little courtyard area is really cool looking, and it's just the way the artists have changed everything up. And each day I went in, the coolness just kind of spread down the hall, down the alleys and streets and around the other things, because the artist was just over there stepping away at all the things. And none of those changes that he did had any impact on what I was doing. And that's just, it's hard to stress how important that aspect of it is, because so much of shipping a game is this battle against entropy, because you get this hundreds of bugs going on in here, and trying to schedule and balance things on lots of different platforms, different video cards and configurations and all of this, and it's just this massive battle against all of these factors that are there. And this doesn't make it easy. I mean, game design's harder than it's ever been because you've just got more and more things to do. But anything that we can do that's sort of a weapon against entropy there is a really big win. And especially when we see, we'll go ahead and demo some of the tools over here on how we build this, because one of the first things that people say is, you talk about a 64,000 by 64,000 texture, they're like, how could we possibly do something useful in that? But we've got a set of tools and ways of creating this that make it extremely intuitive for artists. Well, basically, they get to build this kind of base level using whatever tools they want, as much resources as they want. They can use 20 gigs of textures just to lay out in a conventional art program. I think our artists use, I think Modo, some of this stuff was done in Modo, but they've got a half dozen different tools that they use for that to bring in the base level. But then you can take it in and start converting it inside our tools and cleaning up all of these different areas and then starting to add the real different little layers of detail in here.